Hello, my name is Matt Friedman, and today I'm going to be doing a talk called Be the Hero, Be the Change. In order to understand how somebody like me would kind of come up with this type of book, let me just start off with a little bit of history about who I am and how I got into all of this kind of work. I have been working on the issue of human trafficking for about 30 years, but I've also worked on many other topics. My career started in Nepal. I was there for 8 years. I went from there to Bangladesh for 5 years, 10 years in Thailand, and here I am now in Hong Kong. And during that time, I worked in 42 countries on public health, education, human rights, disease mitigation, all kinds of topics. To begin with, when it comes to my human trafficking journey, when most people think about human trafficking, this is what they think about: forced prostitution, for good reason. There are 4.5 million women and girls in forced prostitution around the world. Now, my first exposure to this was about 30 years ago in Nepal. I was a public health officer, and my job was basically to translate resources into healthier people. At that time, we were finding girls 12, 13 years old who are HIV positive. If you know anything about Nepal, it's a very conservative culture. We should not have found that disease among that age group. So we went to go and talk to them. And we heard pretty much the same story over and over again. And it went something like this. Human trafficker, guy around 20, 25 years old, would go into a village, flash a bunch of money around. He wanted everyone to think he was rich. He'd then go around saying, "I'm looking for a wife. Don't want an urban wife, I want a rural village wife." He'd find a girl, 12, 13 years old. He'd befriend her and then go to the family and say, "I'd like to marry your daughter." They're thinking, wow, he's rich, he's handsome, he's going to take care of our daughter. 2 days later, they actually have a wedding ceremony. The entire community is there. After that, he goes to the family and says, "I'm going to take your daughter to the capital, Kathmandu. But don't worry, I'll be back in 3 months." But that isn't what's going to happen. Instead of taking her to Kathmandu, he takes her to Mumbai, India, to the red light district where prostitution is. He puts her in a room and he says, "Honey, stay here, I'll be back in a few minutes." As she was coming in, she saw all these people dressed funny, all these men milling around. She says, No, don't leave me here." He says, "It's fine, you just stay here." He then goes to the madam to get the $500 for having sold her to the brothel. He has the gold from the wedding, and he hands the wedding photos over to her. He then leaves to go back to Nepal to do this again and again, maybe 40, 50 times in a year. The madam then goes into the room where the girl is and says, "Guess what? Your husband sold you to me, and you're going to be with between 10 and 15 guys a day, every day." You can imagine her shock. No, my husband loves me. No, that's what happened. When she comes to internalize this, many of the girls say, "I will kill myself before I do those shameful things." The madam then takes out the photos of the wedding and says, "Is this your mother, your father, your sister? If you hurt yourself, we will hurt them." So she's trapped in this situation. To make her into a prostitute, it's quite simple. You bring in a couple of professional rapists, and over a 2-day period of time, they rape this girl 20, 30, 40 times, until eventually she just lays back and accepts whatever happens to her. After that, she's put on the line, which means that she will be with between 10 and 15 guys a day, every day, for about 2 years, till she gets what's called black eye, where she's so depleted physically and emotionally and spiritually that nobody wants her, and they throw her out on the street. If she's lucky, she gets back to Nepal. Many of them languish in India, die there. Now, I was hearing this story over and over again, but I didn't understand the evil of it until I actually went to those brothels. I was invited by the Indian government to do public health checks. I was going from brothel to brothel, had a police officer with me, went into one of these places, and there was an 11-year-old trafficking victim. This girl saw this Caucasian guy, saw an opportunity, literally ran up and wrapped herself around me and said, "Save me, save me. They're doing terrible things to me." I looked down at this child who was hysterically crying, wearing a dress 10 sizes too big, turned to the police officer and said, "We need to get her out of here." He said, "You can't do that." "So what are you talking about? You're a police officer." says if we try to do that, we'll both be killed. To make a long story short, we left. We came back with a lot more police, but of course the girl was gone. Now I tell that story because I wasn't one of those 15-year-olds that said, when I grow up, I want to be an activist. In fact, I did everything I could not to be one. But as these situations kept building up, something changed, especially when you have a failure like this, where I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. After that, I started to spend more time at the shelters where the girls are to better understand their condition. And there was a particular shelter that I would go to, and there was a particular girl, Gina, who, for a variety of reasons, I just had a special friendship with. And the last time I saw her, after the day I had seen her the day before, she sent me a letter in Nepalese. And this is what it said. I look back on the day when I left my home. I was only 12. I was so happy, so full of life. I had such dreams. Now look at me. I will never marry. I will never have children. I will not see my next birthday. I need you to promise me something. I need you to do what you can to prevent any other girls from falling into this hole. Promise me you will end this evil. Promise me you will never stop trying. I don't care about myself. I'm done. Don't let any more of our sisters go through what I went through. You can probably imagine how I felt after this. And this for me was the point that brought me from being a regular person to an activist. I crossed over a line on that day because I did what a lot of people who get into activism do, is I just surrendered to the fact that now that I know about this, I can't turn my back on it. This is what I'm going to do with my life. And 30 years later, here I am talking to you. So I'd like to talk a little bit now about some of the things that I learned about kind of how to address the issues of the world and what do we need. The first observation I'd like to point out to you is this. The world needs our help. And it's not just human trafficking. It's pollution, it's hunger, it's clean water, it's animal rights, it's labor. Those are the global issues. But even on the local level, you have homelessness, you have mental health issues, you have unemployment, a whole variety of things. If you look around, you will see there is need everywhere. And just to put some of these numbers into perspective on the global ones, 5.5 million people die from pollution around the world each year. 783 million people without clean water. Close to 800 million people are hungry. 168 million. Look at these numbers. They're massive. And what's really important to recognize about them is that in all of these cases, we're failing. We're not coming anywhere close to being able to address these issues. The second point that I've learned over the years is that we don't pick our issue. Our issue picks us. I wasn't, as I said, one of those 15-year-olds who, when I grew up, I said that I wanted to do human trafficking. I tried over and over again to turn my back on that issue, but it kept coming back to me because something about it made my heart sing. Something about it was part of my DNA. And I say the same about all those other issues. For those of you who have found your issue, you have been able to get to the point where you know what it is, and that's a good thing. There's natural compassion in the world. Here in Hong Kong, you see these elderly people pushing cardboard. There was an example not too long ago where a woman was pushing this across the street in Central. The cardboard fell off. Within 3 seconds, from every direction, you saw people coming to help her. Some people were stopping the traffic. Some people were putting the cardboard back on. Some people were helping her to push it off. One person took her to where she needed to go. Nobody asked her. Nobody asked to do that. They just did it. It's spontaneous. It's a part of what we do as human beings. When we see people in need, we help them. That natural compassion is very much a part of who we are. Now, heroism and the concept of heroism is very confusing to people. I often get in front of an audience of 100 people and say, how many of you in this room are heroes? I'll get one wise-ass person in the back raising their hand just to be funny. Everybody else keeps their hand down because they don't self-identify. They think heroism is basically jumping in front of a bus or going into a burning building. That's not what heroism is for me, and let me define it. When a person does a selfless act with no anticipation of getting anything in return, a kindness, a kind gesture, that's heroic. That's heroism. So if a person is walking in front of you and falls and you help them up, you've done a heroic act. If you call somebody up who's having a bad day, you've done a heroic act. What we're talking about here are gestures to help other people or the world. And so when I define it that way and then go back to the audience and say, how many of you are heroes? You can't help but put your hand up because all of us do heroic things. All of us do charitable things. All of us are helping. And why it's important to use the word hero next to it is we don't give ourselves credit for it. We don't give other people credit. We need to encourage people through positive reinforcement by using words like heroism and being a hero to encourage more and more of that activity to take place. The first thing that I want to say to you is it's extremely important to understand that you don't have to quit your job and go work in a shelter or fly to Cambodia. Many of the things that we can do are tiny little things that are small gestures, but if tens of millions of people did these small gestures, it would add up. So the first thing you need to do is to find out what makes your heart sing. What is your cause? What is the issue that does it for you? I tried many times to turn my back on human trafficking, couldn't do it. It kept coming back to me. You know what your cause is when you look at something and see it and feel it and want to keep going back to it. Maybe it's animals. Maybe it's the environment. Maybe it's oceans. Maybe it's depression. Maybe it's bullying. It doesn't matter. Figure out what it is. In order to do that, go online, look at YouTube videos, explore papers, go to presentations, read the newspaper, find that thing that is there. The next thing is to accept some responsibility. We share this earth with all of the other people in the world. We share the air, the water, the land, the animals, the plants, all of these things. Whose responsibility is it to take care of them? We can't put that all on the government or the United Nations or the NGOs. We have to accept some responsibility ourselves. Accept that responsibility. This is your world. It's everybody's world. We can't expect everybody else to solve the problems. So even if we take a small piece of it and work on it, again, figure out your cause, accept some responsibility. The third thing you need to do is to surrender. And I don't really even know how to describe this other than to I'm just going to do it. Nike got it right when they had that phrase, just do it, because it's a call to action that says, I'm not going to listen to anything else, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to move forward, I'm going to do it, I'm going to make it happen. That surrendering gets rid of all of the voices that you have in your mind. It turns it off. It allows you to say, I am going to go forward and I'm going to make it happen. And then you do something. Anything. Now, what are the things that you can do? People usually at this point, again, they're seeing me as an activist thinking, well, I didn't take that life course. What can I possibly do? Well, first thing is to go through this process. I call it DASH. This is the acronym that describes it. Decide your issue, accept responsibility, surrender, and help. It's fairly straightforward. It doesn't require much rocket science to be able to go through that process. But the first thing you can do, and this is the easiest thing, and anyone can do this from their home, is to learn about the topic that you're most interested in. Go online, become a mini expert, keep reading about it. And once you have learned that, share that information with somebody else. By learning, you've done one thing. By sharing, you've done something else. Teach your kids about it. Sit down with them, go through it, watch the videos with them. These types of things can be done anywhere. And most people, when they think about this, are thinking, well, you know, it's not that relevant and important. Well, it is, because much of the problem is a lack of awareness. The second, you can join or participate as a volunteer. And again, my organization, many of the volunteers work from home. They're professionals who have full-time jobs, and those jobs are quite fulfilling, but you know, I give them a task and they do it from home. Donating or giving. There's a lot of organizations that are struggling, especially now, because you have people aren't donating to the causes out there now. Donating a small amount of money, you know, fundraising, can really go a long way. Just to put this into perspective, there are some shelters in Cambodia that have trafficking victims that for $5 US a day, they will take care of this person. Maybe the state will cover 2 weeks, maybe they need another 2 weeks. Your small contribution, giving up one big, going out on a Friday night meal, giving that money to the right organization can make a difference. All of these things are heroic. All of these things add up. All of these things are contributions to making the world a better place. The last thing I want to say about this is that, as I said, we all have a God-given gift, an inherent thing that we're good at, a personal talent. For some of us, it may be dance, it could be singing, it could be public speaking, it could be writing, it could be selling t-shirts, it doesn't matter. If you're able to find your cause and apply to that cause what it is your gift is, it's a double win. Because you're doing something you naturally feel good about, you care about, you're adding value, and all of these topics that I'm talking about, even human trafficking, we've used dance interpretations, we've used music, we've used public speaking, we've sold t-shirts, all of those, and every other issue is very much the same. We are launching the Be the Hero campaign. It's not about raising money, it's about helping to inspire people to act, to offer the tools. So the book that you see, and you'll see in a moment, is one example of what is offered. There's videos, there's podcasts, there's testimonies, we're trying to get volunteers to volunteer. And our hope from today is to get 100,000 people to self-identify as saying, I did something. And if that means just watching a video and telling one other person you've done something, and anything else. And if you do 10 things, 15, I don't care. We just want people to do it. So that's what we're doing here today as part of this process. This is the book that we're launching today. It's called Be the Hero, Be the Change. It was written for anyone who has that inkling or that idea of wanting to kind of get out of their comfort zone, to step up, to accept some responsibility, and to help be a part of making the world a better place.